Hey, it's Over Screaming Space and Equity. We're all about increasing assets and creating new space. Here today to discuss America's divestment in education. And I'm going to go about it a roundabout way. The 10 richest people on the planet are Elon Musk, 300 billion. Elon Musk is the founder of Tesla, SpaceX. He purchased Twitter X, and then he's got Starlink. I would say he's the largest government contractor on the planet. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, about $200 billion, 200 plus billion dollars. Mark Zuckerberg, 200 plus billion dollars. That is Meta, Facebook. Bernard Arnault, his family owns Louis Vuitton, 167 billion. The only him he and one other individual are the only non-tech related billionaires on this list. Warren Buffett is 94 years old, is the Oracle of Omaha, Berkshire Hathaway. He actually made his 166 billion by investing in companies and the long-term success of companies. Larry Ellison, Oracle, that's software, Silicon Valley area, 162 billion. Bill Gates, Microsoft, 161 billion. Larry Page, Google, Alphabet, 141 billion. His business partner, Sergey Brin, 133 billion, also Google. And then Steve Ballmer, LA Clippers, but he made his money at Microsoft, 132 billion. 10 individuals, 10 men, 10 white men, eight of them are in tech. We have one in retail, and one is just an investor. I say just an investor, but probably the one that he actually grew his businesses organically through investing in other businesses. I'm not trying to disparage anything else, but I am arguing that those guys, the top three guys, they got very rich, richer than rich during the pandemic. See it how you see it. But this is part of America's divestment in education. It wasn't because of the pandemic, but the trend is being enhanced. And this is why, I believe. So, how do you say America has divested in education? Well, I just look at what people do instead of what necessarily they say. After World War II, there was a GI Bill that made it easier for people coming back from the war to buy real estate, to get a college education. Education was very inexpensive coming out of World War II, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. Parents could literally work in a factory and write a check for their kids' school. They had one salary, meaning like mom stayed home and took care of the kids. Dad, with a high school education, had the ability to buy a home, to pay for his kids' tuition, to retire and live out throughout retirement on his pension, his family pension, and make it. You can't necessarily do that these days. My wife is a physician. At 43 years old, she paid off her student loans. So the cost of education is a lot higher. The investment in education is higher. What else do I mean by that? So in the state of Texas, we're on this big push for vouchers. The public school system has to fight for every scrap to get just the cost of living maintained for the school system. Meaning, if a teacher, when I taught over a decade and nearly a decade and a half ago, my final salary as a teacher was like 53,000. Then I coached. If you add my coaching plus the salary, it was around 58,000. All right. So the reason I went back into banking was when I was having my second child, I said I can't support my family off of this. Right. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy everything, but I couldn't. The passion wasn't enough to feed my family. So I went back to banking, kind of did more in entrepreneurial space, but the thought process was it's insufficient for me to take care of my family. I left in 2012. I left my last year teaching was January 31st, 2012. 58,000 if you add my coaching supplement. If a teacher makes 60,000 today, which is $2,000 more than I made in 2012, that teacher is making less, bringing home less than I was bringing home due to inflation. So in 2012, we're 13 years beyond that. Natural inflation is like 2, 3%. We've experienced 7 to 10% inflation since the pandemic. So the teacher making 60,000, 65,000 is making less than I was making back then. And when I was making that 58,000, my wife was in residency and we had the Air Force stipend and then we had my rental property. So we had other forms of income to help take care of the family. If a teacher is let's say you got a teacher and she's got two kids and she's single for whatever reason, even if her husband is participating through child support, she can't sustain a household on 60,000, but that's what public school teachers are charged to do. That's just take care of themselves. Then they're charged to go into the classroom. And even though we've had this much inflation, the percentage that the schools, the ISDs receive from the state is less and less and less. It's not sufficient to meet their needs. So a lot of school districts are running a deficit. They have to figure out how to continue to operate. And I would argue that the system is designed for those school districts to fail. What do I mean by that? So our governor is a big proponent of a voucher program. In Texas, when I got to Texas, I thought it was very interesting. I mean, everybody would talk about how they went to these private schools like St. Mark's and they spent $30,000 a year for private school. And the voucher system would say, hey, give the parent a choice. And instead of going to the school that they don't believe in, that their child is assigned to, they can go take their voucher and go to St. Mark's. All right, so Dallas ISD, the largest ISD in the DFW area, has 240 schools. Dallas Fort Worth proper has 100 private schools. So that means that Dallas ISD has twice, almost one and a half times more schools than all the private schools combined in DFW, not just Dallas, but also in Fort Worth. There's 100 private schools. And let's say, I don't know how many charter schools, but let's say there's 100 charter schools. So if Dallas ISD, which is one ISD, it doesn't include Arlington ISD, it doesn't include Fort Worth ISD, it doesn't include Frisco, Allen, Garland, all these other school districts that also have students that you say, hey, they can use the voucher program and go anywhere. If you said that there was 200 private schools and charter schools, because I'm just saying, let's just say there's 100 charter schools in the DFW area. That is still 40 less than just Dallas ISD alone. What about the kids in Arlington? What about the kids? So what I'm saying is that this macro data is available at the higher levels. They know that the voucher program cannot sufficiently support all the kids. Yes, it can support brilliant kids. It can support extremely athletic kids that can help enhance your program. But can it support the average kid? Can it support the kid that's kind of struggling and as a kid you wouldn't want to recruit to your private school? I would say no. But that is okay because we have a long precedent, probably a 30 plus year precedent of divesting in education. Why is that the case? Because I don't believe that Elon Musk believes that we have the workforce through the public school systems to support what he's doing at Tesla, to support what he's doing at Starlink and SpaceX. I don't believe that those who work in the C-suite at Google want or believe that what's coming out of the public schools is what they need. I believe in what people do versus what they say. And what if we're pushing vouchers, knowing that vouchers cannot sufficiently support the masses of students, what are we actually doing? Well, what we're doing is saying, hey, right now in the AI space, we are not as far along as we need to be. And I believe the reason why President Trump's inauguration, that Elon Musk was front and center, that Jeff Bezos was front and center, that Mark Zuckerberg was front and center, even though these individuals might not necessarily be best friends. And we know that Tim Cook is not a big fan or friend of either Elon Musk or Donald Trump, but Tim Cook was there too. And I believe the reason why these techno capitalists were front and center was the message is our investment going forward in the United States, we need to focus, just like when we're at the space race, we need to focus on AI. There's an AI race taking place. And what do I mean by that? So several months back, I saw an interview between Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, one of the largest private equity firms on the planet, if not the largest, and CEO of an AI firm out in the Middle East. They were getting together and they were talking about a tens of billion, if not hundreds of billion-dollar project that included establishing a warehouse for AI support. What I mean by that? So the bandwidth you need to generate, let's say like when people are doing cryptocurrency, you know how it takes so much energy to put these data centers together? Well, the data center for a facility is extremely energy intensive. So the warehouse space is going to be large, but also the energy that it's going to require to support the data center for an AI facility is significant. So significant that BlackRock, who manages trillions of dollars, and another firm who are not necessarily in agreement based on the conversation that was happening in this interview. These guys didn't see Larry Fink and the guy that ran this AI company out of the Middle East. He was an Asian, but his company was based in somewhere in the Middle East. And I wish I could remember that interview. Anyhow, those guys were not in agreement and everything, but they were in agreement that they needed to share in the capital burden to put up this warehouse. I believe that the president and his techno giants have a mission to make the United States the leader in generative AI, and they believe that having the manufacturing capability for the needs of AI is a paramount economic concern and interest in the United States, and their focus is on that. Their focus is not on educating the masses. So Linda McMahon, who is the wife of a guy who runs a wrestling company or WWE, is the head of education. I don't know her credentials, and maybe I'm just dead wrong. I do not know her credentials in leading America's education initiative. But I do know her husband is Vince McMahon, and that's what I know about her. And maybe I should do my research. I should get on a AI and find out what is Linda McMahon's credentials to be the head of education. But I do know by the state of Texas, which is one of the largest populations in the country, the interest is to move to a voucher program. And it does not involve educating the masses as I described. We don't even have the capacity through vouchers to replace that with the public school system. So we're no longer investing in public schools. When an education to go to a school like Wake Forest University's, the tuition is $83,000 a year. You either have a lot of wealth, you have a scholarship, or you're going to take on 300 plus $1,000 in debt. That's just the tuition. That's not room and board. So if the tuition is $83,000 a year, that Wake Forest education is not for everybody. It's not for the masses. It's for the elites, elite athletes, elite students. And when I say elite, parents of extremely wealthy people that can write that check. Honestly, I don't tell my daughter this, but she'll probably see this. I was excited when she got waitlisted to Wake Forest because it would have been $83,000 tuition. UT Austin, it's about $20,000 a year for in-state residents. 20,000, 83,000, 20,000, 83,000. She can, let's say she just did student loans all the way, which is not the case. Her mom and I are writing a pretty penny, but she is getting some student loans. But let's say student loans was the only capacity she had. She would come out less than $100,000, which I don't think is ideal in today's economy, but it's way better than 83,000 times four. Let's just say we pay for room and board, but we went 83,000 a year, 166,000 in 2 years, over 372,000 in 4 years for an undergrad degree. My daughter is finishing up her sophomore year. Her roommate is a senior, has done roughly, this is just an estimate based on the conversation, roughly 300 applications and had 2 interviews. So think about that if you're graduating with 300,000 plus in student loans, which the government will allow you to do as a 21-year-old. From undergrad, there are probably, while I'm speaking, there are probably tens of thousands of undergrad students with plus $300,000 in student loan debts. And they don't, and the job prospects are not spectacular. So that's another conversation for another podcast of what do you do in such an economy when you're coming out and there's not that much work available and you've got student loans. So that's another conversation. But this conversation is to focus on the fact that what people are doing is saying that investing in the education of the masses is no longer an American agenda. Instead, if we have at the inauguration at least four, if not more, of the richest people on the planet front and center, and they're all involved in tech, techno capitalists, our agenda is to focus our investments in the next generation of the workforce, which is AI, generative AI. That's what we're investing in. We're not investing in the people. So if we're not investing in the people, then what is the plan for the people? That's a question that I don't have necessarily the answer to, but you need to be prepared. Even if you just think about from the school level, if we know if the vouchers win, which I don't see how they're not going to win, but if vouchers win and you're still required to educate individuals up to the age of 16, what do you do with the excess individuals that can't get into these charter and private schools? Do you prepare them for the juvenile system? Do you say, hey, okay, well, when they're not going to school, they're truant, and therefore you get them in the prison industrial complex that is privatized? Maybe that is the plan. But I don't know that people with the macro data have thought about this, and they won't tell you their plan, but they'll show you their plan. I believe at Space and Equity, we believe that investing in yourself, creating new space, increasing assets and creating new space is the way to go. It's not an easy thing to do, it's a collective thing to do. If you don't have a plan, somebody has a plan for you, and you might not always like their plan. When you come correct, they can't stop you.